All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to subgroup these drums together because I want to put an EQ on the drums, and I want to show you how subgroups work as well. So I'm just going to highlight all these. I'm going to go ahead and make a new stereo aux input, name it drum group. And all of these here, I'm going to send them all to the drum group there by going down to track, drum group. I'm holding an Option and Shift right now. I highlighted them all. I'm holding Option Shift, and they're all going to go to my drum group here. And I'm going to send this drum group to the instrument group just so we can keep everything all together. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just mute these tracks here so we're not hearing them. I'm going to hold down Command and click the S button so we get that solo safe. Now let's listen to this. Where are we? We're over here. So let's loop this section right here. Great. All right, cool. So now I've got the drum tracks here so I can hear them nice and loud. Let's put an EQ on this. I'm gonna click in here. I'm gonna put a multi-channel EQ 7 because that has all the different band types in here. And let's take a look at our notes and go over these different EQ types. So we have different types, and this is pretty much the same for all different EQs, and this is how it works on the Audient as well. So the EQs are basically independent gain adjustment for specific groups of frequencies. So different groups of frequencies in there, it's basically a gain, make it louder or softer for those frequencies. And a lot of people don't really think of it like that. They don't really think of it like that, and that affects how you actually work with EQs and stuff. So solo safe, basically, Tamelia, what it does is it lets the instruments always play through that solo here. Let me just show you real quick, a quick example. If I do not have it solo safed, I just hold down Command and click the solo button again to unsolo safe it. If I hit S on one of these, we're not going to hear anything because the signal is going from here into this aux channel, and now it's stopping at the aux channel because this is muted because I soloed this one. But if I solo safe this, Command and click the S button, if I solo it, now we're going to hear it. We're going to hear it. And I don't have to click solo on this one. If I don't have it solo saved, see how now we're not hearing it anymore? I would have to click solo on it every single time. There's no shortcut, Rilla. It's just you hold down Command and click that solo button. Okay, great. When you watch this video again, you're going to see me say that because I've already said that like 3 or 4 times. So you're gonna get it. If you watch this video again, you're gonna get it for sure, definitely. So I recommend watching this video again. There's a lot of good little things in this video that you may have missed. All right, anyway, going back to our EQs. So we've got low cut, low shelf, bell, high shelf, and a high cut. Now, the low cut and the high cut are also called a high pass or a low pass. It's the same thing. The low cut is also called a high pass, and the high cut is also called a low pass. And different EQs talk about it differently. So for example, over here, in Pro Tools they call it a high pass filter, and over here they call it a low pass filter. But some of them say low cut or high cut. So it just really depends on the EQ that you're using. So the low cut filter cuts all the frequencies below a certain point. So what that one looks like is this. The green part here is our frequencies that are going through. So if I turn on my low cut, and again, you push the in button to turn these on. So I'm going to turn all these off right here. So now you can see if I move my frequency knob here, let me just zoom out, I don't need to be that zoomed in. If I move my frequency knob here, and I'm going to solo these ones, wait, I don't need to solo them because the other ones are muted. Watch what happens. Or I should say rather, listen to what happens. So now I'm cutting out my low frequencies. It's a high pass filter or a low cut. And the same thing will happen with the other one. This is a low pass filter or a high cut. There we go. And that's an example of what those are. All right. So these, I gotta say, these filters, they actually the Audient does not have a filter on it. So these are just part of the Pro Tools, and like most EQs do have a filter, but the hardware ones sometimes they don't have a filter on it. So we don't have that actually on the Audient. What we do have on the Audient are the Bell EQs, and that's the ones in the middle. It's the parametric EQ and the fully parametric EQ, and they also have the shelf EQs. So these two right here, the shelf, low shelf, high shelf, and the Bell, they do have those, and those are right here in Pro Tools. Here, see, it has low frequency and high frequency, and then you've got all your mid frequencies in the middle. So basically, the Audient has these two and these two, but not this one, or this one. So the high pass, low pass filter and the mid frequency are not in there. And then the low frequencies and low mid frequencies and high mid frequencies and high frequencies, they are on there. So let's just take a look at this low mid here. And that's okay, you're good. So here we go, low mid frequency here, boom. Now, if I adjust my gain, I can take out the low frequencies, or I can boost the low frequencies. And I can also adjust what frequencies I'm boosting or reducing. You hear how different that sounds? Okay. Now, you'll notice that there is a Q button here. If I want to put this back to 0, I just hold down Option and click it, just like we do with our main fader. A few of you have asked me about that, and I've explained it to you. Just hold Option and click the fader. But you notice here, there's a Q here, Q, Q, right this, right? Well, what this Q does is it shapes the curve here. So check this out. Wider or narrower. Look at that, wide, narrow. I make it super narrow like this, gives it a different sound. See that? Hear that sound right there? Very different sound. This one has more like a, it sounds like it's got a resonance to it, which it does. So depending on what the sound you want, you can adjust that Q right there. Now, same thing happens, I didn't really talk about it, same thing happens with this, the high pass filter here. If I move this up, I can move this up to 24 dB per octave, 18 dB, 12, and 6. What that means is basically it's cutting it that many decibels per octave, and the octave is a double or half of the frequency here. So if you wanted to cut out all the frequencies and sound kind of unnatural, you put it really high up to 24. But if you wanted to still let some of the frequencies through and sound a bit smoother, you put it down to a lower number. That's what those do. Okay. And then finally we have our mid frequencies on here, the low mid, high mid, and then just the mid. And what these do is they are what we call fully parametric. All these are fully parametric. And what that means is it's got the gain, and it's got the frequency, and it's got the Q, which is the bandwidth there. So we're gonna click on this. I'm gonna go ahead and here, let's put boost it so you can hear it better. I'm gonna push the Q up. And you can hear what frequency it's affecting. Hear how that sounds like super boxy? I can pull it back and get rid of some of that boxiness. So a really good way to find problem frequencies is if you boost the signal with the gain, narrow the Q or the bandwidth there, and then and then search around until you hear the frequency that's giving you problems, and then you pull it back a little bit. So that's a really good kind of tip, especially for when you're first starting off with this stuff. So you got the low mid, mid frequencies and high mid, and you'll notice that the frequencies only go up so far. So if I push this up, see this frequency only goes up to 1K and goes down to 40 Hertz. And this mid one here, the high mid, only goes down to 200 Hertz and goes up to 18K. Okay, so these have they have ranges which they can work in, and that's the same thing on the Audient board. It's no different on the Audient board. If we take a look at the Audient, we can see the high frequency is the high frequency, low frequency. These are shelves, and it's you've got a button here you can press in. Number 4 here is the gain, and this one here has 10 kilohertz and 18 kilohertz. It does not have a Q knob. So for example, if we were looking at this in Pro Tools, this would look like this, and it would be set for what is it, 100 Hertz? Without a Q, it doesn't have this knob here at all. Or 50 Hertz. So you have those two options. So like this, or this, and you have a gain knob. So you can boost it or you can lower it. But you only have two choices, and if the button is up, it's 10 kilohertz, 50 Hertz and 100 Hertz on the low end. And the top end is 10 kilohertz or 18K. So we can go over here to this one, and then 18K, can boost it. Or 10. So you can hear that. And depending on how good your ears are, you can hear that more or less. If your ears are kind of damaged, then you won't be able to hear that too much. Hopefully that's not the case with you. So that's these here. And that's just a button that you press to flip those frequencies. And then down here in the mids, we have the high mid and the low mid, and the low mid has between 50 and 1.5K, and the high mid has between 450 Hertz and 20K. So they kind of travel quite a bit. And then over here, the left side is narrower and the right side is wider, and that's just this one here. So the Q, it's opposite from this one here. If the left side is wider on this one and going to the right is narrower, it's the opposite here, but you can see the pictures right there. And then you have your frequency shift right there. Cool. And this is just all explained right here. Parametric EQ, adjust the gain on a sweepable range of frequencies, and a fully parametric EQ, adjust the gain and bandwidth on a sweepable range of frequencies. So the Mackie 1604 mixer is parametric for the middle, and the Audient is fully parametric, and that's the difference between those. And you have, on a fully parametric, you have 3 controls. You have the gain, the frequency, and the bandwidth, which is called Q. The reason why it's called Q is because they just ran out of letters. They didn't have any other interesting letters to call stuff, so they just called it Q, whoever made that one. And then shelf EQ adjusts all the frequencies below or low shelf or above high shelf a certain point, and it looks like this and close up. And there's usually 2 controls, but sometimes there's 3. The gain, the frequency, and the Q adjust the shelf slope. There's not always a Q on your shelf. For example, on the Audient, there's not a Q on the Audient high shelf. It's just frequencies. All right, and one thing about EQing, and we're going to talk about this later on, but it's subtractive EQing, turning down the elements that are too loud to isolate the frequencies you want to hear more of. So for example, if I wanted to hear this be more low end, well, what I can do, I can boost the low end, and we can hear it, but I could also subtract out problem frequencies. So I could say, okay, maybe it's not the low end, it's a problem. Maybe it's just like some specific frequencies in here. So I can kind of balance it out. Really what you don't want to do is you don't want to boost things too much, because remember what we said over here. An EQ is an independent gain adjustment for a specific group of frequencies. And if you're boosting things, well, that's gonna adjust your headroom here. So if I'm taking things, I'm saying, I want more bass. See what's happening? We're actually about to clip this output right here. And it's also just too bassy. Maybe just a little bit like that. This is just 2 decibels, and that might be a good amount of bass in there. Okay, so that's that's some tricks to using EQs effectively. We're going to talk about this more as we talk about mixing and stuff like that. EQs, compressors, reverbs, and delays, especially EQs, reverbs, and compressors. These are super important to mixing, but they're also really tricky to master. They seem very easy at first because you can, especially EQs, you can hear everything really clearly with an EQ, just crank it or dip it. But actually to use an EQ effectively takes a long time to master that and really get going with it. Compressors are a bit more difficult because it's harder to hear what a compressor is doing for people. But again, it's the type of thing where you're going to be working on it for a long time. Awesome.